going to save America, and we're going to cut your taxes, end inflation, slash your prices, raise your wages.
I would ask you in this moment to think of the women in your life that you love, daughters, wives, moms, aunts, uncles, sisters, whoever it is. Think about those women.
When Donald Trump was president, the border was secure and the world was at peace.
From the CBS Broadcast Center in New York, welcome to this election eve edition of America Decides. I'm Ed O'Keefe. The 2024 campaign is down to its final hours, and the latest CBS News Battleground Tracker has the candidates still deadlocked in key states. Vice President Harris and former President Donald Trump are making their final pitches at rallies in several battleground states today. Harris focused entirely on Pennsylvania, holding a star-studded rally slated for Philadelphia late tonight. Trump also in the Keystone State and heading for his final rally later in Michigan after telling supporters in North Carolina this morning that the race is, quote, ours to lose. And with nearly half of 2020's electorate, that's over 80 million people, 80 million, having already cast ballots in this race, the focus is now on those voters who are still undecided. So let us begin with just one day to go, hours left in this campaign with Aaron Navarro and Skylar Henry. Aaron is in Allentown, Pennsylvania. Skylar in Raleigh, North Carolina, two of the key East Coast battleground states. Aaron, first to you. Harris is zipping across Pennsylvania today. Why all this attention on that state, Commonwealth more specifically, in the final hours?
Ed, good to be with you. From talking to Democratic officials, they believe that the blue wall is Harris's clearest path to 270 electoral college votes. Pennsylvania, with its 19 votes, is the crown jewel. It's been the Commonwealth where Harris has been the most out of any battleground state this cycle. It's the state where you're seeing polls show it continuously tied in the last months, weeks, and days of this campaign. But another thing is that Pennsylvania, maybe compared to other battleground states, is expecting to see a large number of in-person election day voters. There are about 1 million less mail ballots requested this cycle compared to in 2020, in part because of COVID, but also showing that many voters are looking to go in person tomorrow, hit the polls, do the tradition of opening the curtain and filling out the ballot. From talking to people online here, that's something that they mentioned they wanted to do. Harris going to the bases, making sure that people know the polling hours and come out to vote is a key part if she wants to win this state.
So Allentown, Scranton, Pittsburgh in Pennsylvania there or Philadelphia in Pennsylvania. You mentioned a blue wall. Of course, that's Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin, the three big ones that Biden won 4 years ago that she'd like to win as well. They'd also like to make progress, however, down in the Tar Heel state of North Carolina. Skylar, where you are earlier today, former President Trump, who's trying to hold the state, summed up his closing message like this.
And with your vote tomorrow, we're going to fire Kamala, we're going to save America, and we're going to cut your taxes, end inflation, slash your prices, raise your wages, and bring thousands of factories back to America and back to North Carolina.
So, Skylar, I read earlier today he held 5 rallies there in the last few days. How significant is it that he's spending so much time in North Carolina now when he was ahead there earlier in the race?
Isn't that something? I think when you take the bird's eye view of what's going on here in the Tar Heel state, that's especially interesting, especially considering the fact that Trump carried this state the last 2 election cycles. It's also interesting that this is the only battleground state of the 7 that we identify as the state that he won 4 years ago. And so for him to put so much attention here in the Tar Heel state is absolutely something to pay attention to. We were kind of at that rally earlier today in Raleigh. We saw voters out there as well. But we've also crisscrossed the state and talked to voters about what they have wanted to see in terms of out of the former president. And they talked about what he could do for them as it relates to the economy, what he could do for them as it relates to immigration, as well as other top issues. And they feel as if that is why they want to continue to support him. As it relates to the Harris-Walz ticket, they feel as if the Tar Heel state is very much in play. In fact, many within the campaign say that they are making some inroads, especially in those hot-button areas that typically go blue, right? That's here in the Research Triangle. That's what they call this area where several of these universities are, including UNC and Duke, as well as Charlotte and Western North Carolina. They feel that they are making significant progress there. But we're talking about early voting and numbers. They have shattered numbers here in this state, so much so that nearly 4.5 million ballots have already been cast. Most of those, at least up until this point, have been Republican. And so that is something that is interesting as well, Ed, especially when you take into consideration what we saw in terms of the messaging surrounding early voting back in 2020 versus what we see now in 2024. And so I think that is something that the Trump team is certainly hoping sticks as the ballots close tomorrow.
Aaron, you spoke with the mayor of Allentown, where you are, earlier today about the effect of Trump's Madison Square Garden rally on Latino voters in a city that has a considerable population of them, and is one of the reasons why both campaigns have focused on it so much. What did the mayor have to tell you?
The mayor told me, and it's something I heard from Puerto Rican voters I was talking to before the event, that it has truly galvanized Latino voters. Yes, there were already Latino voters that were following Harris and were going to support her regardless, but he says that it got some people, quote, off the couch. Take a listen to what he had to tell me.
I think the enthusiasm was already high for Vice President Harris. I think there were a lot of Latinos who weren't happy with what they were hearing coming out of the Trump campaign, and they were excited about the opportunity to elect a president that has a plan for the future. After the comments that were made at the rally at Madison Square Garden, there were a lot of, particularly Puerto Ricans, Boricuas, that were angered by the comments and motivated to get off the couch. People who might have been interested in Vice President Harris, but not necessarily sure they were going to get out to vote, they're getting out to vote now.
And here at the event, the introductory speakers, from the mayor to Puerto Rican rapper from the Bronx, Fat Joe, really mentioned that garbage island joke from the Madison Square Garden rally as a reason that voters here are going to reject former President Trump. Fat Joe said, quote, "If I'm speaking to some undecided Puerto Ricans, especially in Pennsylvania, what more do they got to do to show you who they are?" in reference to Trump and his followers.
Even Fat Joe out there on the last day of the campaign. Skylar, you spoke with the Democratic candidate for Governor, Josh Stein, as 4.5 million people have already voted in North Carolina. What did he tell you about what Harris needs to do in order to win the state tomorrow night?
Yeah, Ed, you know what's funny? This is a state that is largely known for its shades of blue, especially when you take into consideration the colleges in this area. But the governor said that this is a purple state as it relates to politics. And if you take a look at what we've seen in terms of the Republican state legislature, Republicans have been in control, at least in the state house, for some time now, though they have sent a Democrat to the governor's mansion, at least since 2017, in Governor Roy Cooper. But he said in order for Democrats to make significant progress, they have to focus on the issues. I talked about this just a little bit, the economy, immigration, but also public safety and doing a little bit better in the public schooling system. Take a listen. Given the fact that Republicans have essentially carried the state on the presidential candidate level for these last couple of cycles, how do you change that?
Yeah, well, I mean, President Trump won in 2020 by a hair's breadth, so it doesn't take much to change it, and a lot of history has occurred since that election, most notably January 6th. So we'll see what happens on the presidential level.
And I think that really just goes to show just how close this race is, razor thin. Obviously, both campaigns putting a lot of attention here in these final days before the election. We'll see what happens tomorrow.
Skylar Henry talking about shades of blue, wearing shades of red and blue there in Raleigh. We thank you for that and for your reporting. Aaron Navarro, one of our road warriors who's been out there more than most in Allentown, Pennsylvania, thank you as well. Enjoy the last day out on the trail. And from coverage in the field, from Aaron, Skylar, and others, to analysis and projections made here in New York, we at CBS News are ready for Election Day 2024. Take a look at this, for example. This behind-the-scenes look at our high-tech set. We are debuting its first ever, our first ever, immersive, augmented, and virtual reality presidential election center. And you can watch Election Night with the CBS News team live from our election headquarters in New York and with our team spread out across the country. Join us for real-time results, analysis, and exclusive polling. It all begins at 4 p.m. Eastern here on CBS News 24/7 and continues at 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 in the West on the CBS television network. Will the chips fall for Harris in Nevada? Despite going blue for 4 consecutive elections, the VP is struggling to stay ahead in Nevada. We'll speak with Congressman Stephen Horsford, key Harris-Walz campaign official from the Silver State. Stay with us. You're streaming America Decides.
I regret deeply how angry the tone of the campaign became.
optimistic that we are going to win, not only for Kamala Harris and Tim Walz, but for Jackie Rosen in this state. I'm absolutely confident in our ground game.
That was Nevada Democratic Senator Catherine Cortez Masto on Sunday's Face the Nation, confident the Harris campaign can keep her state blue for the 5th straight consecutive presidential election cycle. Her colleague, Nevada Democratic Congressman Stephen Horsford, joins us now. He serves as chairman of the Congressional Black Caucus and is a national co-chair of the Harris-Walz campaign. Joins us from Las Vegas. Congressman, great to see you. CBS News' Battleground Tracker poll currently has Nevada tied. So how confident are you that the VP is going to be able to pull this off?
Well, thank you for having me on, Ed. It's great to be with you. Look, I know that polls are about margin of error, but this election is going to be won because of margin of effort. And it's hundreds, if not thousands, of volunteers who are talking to the final undecided voters across all parties, Republicans, nonpartisans, and Democrats, to make sure that they know how important their vote is on Tuesday. We're just hours away, and Nevada will deliver for Kamala Harris and Tim Walz and Democrats up and down the ballot.
What is it about what you guys do in Nevada as Democrats to turn out voters that gets you by just hundreds, if not a small group of thousands of votes every time? This is the tradition that dates back to the late Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid, and there have been a lot of concerns about whether you guys still can do it. What is it? What's the secret sauce for you guys when it comes to turning out voters?
It's all about a ground game. You had Senator Cortez Masto on. She won by 7,928 votes just last election cycle. All of our statewide races can be close sometimes, but this is a consequential election. On one hand, you have Donald Trump, who is focused on an enemies list, on grievances and revenge against his political enemies, and you have Kamala Harris, who has a to-do list. And on her to-do list are issues of facing Nevadans and Americans, from lowering the cost of housing to passing her opportunity economy agenda, to making sure that we protect a woman's right to make her own healthcare decisions. But in order for that to happen, we also have to fire Mike Johnson and elect Hakeem Jeffries as our next Speaker of the House, and Democrats in the majority, because that's how these bills will get to Kamala Harris's desk as the 47th president of the United States.
I want to get to Congress in a second, but I got to ask you, the VP was there last Thursday. She's ending her campaign in the East, focused mostly on the blue wall states. In your view, did she spend enough time in Nevada and the Southwest in order to win out there?
Oh, absolutely. The vice president has been to Nevada, I believe, 20 times, and at least 9 since becoming the nominee. And what she understands are the needs of Nevadans. She was here in my district, in fact, talking again to the constituents here who matter, who she understands their frustration that, the cost of housing, the cost of rent, the cost of childcare, the fact that there's an effort to roll back the Affordable Care Act, to take away a woman's right to make her own health care decisions. We have those protections in state law, but if Donald Trump and Mike Johnson get their way and they pass a national ban, those rights go away here in Nevada as well. And that is driving a historic turnout among women, among young voters, among nonpartisans, and among people across every ethnic and racial background. That's why we're going to win this state for Kamala Harris.
Now, you've been mentioning the congressional races. You have your own re-election race tomorrow, and I've heard you've been actually out campaigning away from Nevada for other Democrats because you're feeling that confident about your own race against the former Las Vegas Mayor John Lee?
Well, I'm here in my district. I have spent time making sure that the voters in my district know how important their vote is. I'm going to continue to do that up until the polls close here at 7 p.m. But I've done my part as the chair of the Congressional Black Caucus and co-chair of the Harris-Walz campaign to make sure that we win everywhere, because it's going to take turning out the vote in all of the battlegrounds. Nevada, we are known as a battle-born state, and we're going to win this election up and down the ballot for Kamala Harris and Tim Walz, for Senator Rosen, and for House Democrats, including myself.
You said 7,928 was the vote margin for Senator Masto. That's like a ballroom there on the Strip. We'll see if you can fill it again tomorrow night. Congressman Stephen Horsford, thank you for being with us. Safe travels.
Thank you, Ed.
To get me, somebody would have to shoot through the fake news, and I don't mind that so much.
The former president going after reporters and critics alike. We'll cut through Trump's controversial rhetoric with a senior campaign advisor. Stay with us. You're streaming America Decides.
So ask them to look beyond the speeches and the ads and all the attacks, because talk is cheap. Tomorrow we begin a better tomorrow. This nation is going to begin to change for the better tomorrow.
Welcome back to America Decides. While making his final pitch to voters in recent days, former President Trump has been escalating his violent rhetoric. The Republican presidential nominee said Sunday he wouldn't mind if someone tried to, quote, shoot through the fake news in an effort to assassinate him. Just days before, he attacked former Congresswoman Liz Cheney as a, quote, war hawk and suggested she should be sent into the line of fire. We're joined now by Brian Lanza, who is a senior advisor for the Trump campaign. He's there in West Palm Beach, Florida, near Mar-a-Lago, where the former president will be watching returns tomorrow night. Brian, you may recall Republican leaders in recent days slammed the vice president for, quote, escalating the threat environment, unquote, with her, quote, irresponsible rhetoric. I'm curious, these comments he's made in recent days, do they not do just that?
First of all, Ed, thank you for having me. Listen, Kamala Harris and her team have been very negative from the very beginning. They've been so negative in their rhetoric that President Trump had 2 assassination attempts. One, a bullet grazed his ear, and another when the Secret Service had to step in. So, yeah, he's concerned about violence, but primarily directed toward him. You know, at the end, the media likes to misinterpret some of the things that the campaign has said. They certainly misinterpreted his comments, what he said to Cheney and the firing squad. We saw that cleared up in the media several hours later. And, you know, the president, you know, what he said the other day was said in gist. At the end of the day, the things that are going to matter aren't these things that the media likes to highlight. It's going to matter the economy. It's going to matter the inflation. It's going to matter people's pocketbooks. So when they go into the polls, they're going to have to ask themselves the very basic question. Are you better off today than you were 4 years ago? And the vast majority of the country are going to say no, they're not. In fact, working class voters, paycheck to paycheck voters are going to say not only we're worse off, we're near bankruptcy. We've maxed out our credit cards under this this Biden-Harris administration, and we can only expect worse. And we're looking for change, and we've learned in the polling, we've learned in the last 90 days that the only change agent on this campaign is Donald Trump. And so we tell the voters, change is coming, and change is coming tomorrow.
Brian, you say that what he said about reporters was said in jest. Let's play the clip and just let the viewers hear it and decide for themselves.
I have a piece of glass over here, and I don't have a piece of glass there. And I have this piece of glass here, but all we have really over here is the fake news, right? And to get me, somebody would have to shoot through the fake news, and I don't mind that so much.
So you think that's a joke?
Listen, I heard a lot of people laughing, but also you have to have some
his
levity.
Most
this guy has been
supporters
shot
who
at.
show
He's
up for
had
his
2
event
bullets.
laugh at it. Yes,
Hold on,
Brian.
Ed.
But
Hold
come
on,
on.
Ed.
They're the ones that already banked away. You know you have to win undecided voters in states all across the country.
You had 1 bullet graze his ear, so he's allowed to have some moments of levity with respect to assassination attempts.
Why keep joking about this stuff?
Because you guys keep bringing it up. He says 80,000 other words at these rallies, and you guys... He says 80,000 other words at these rallies, and you guys want to focus on less than 10 words. Let me tell you what the American people are focused on. They're not focused on the media's feelings being hurt. They're not even focused on Donald Trump's assassination attempt. They're focused on their own pocketbooks. They're focused on the border being broken. And as President Trump has said from day one of this campaign, that this administration has led America astray. They've led to the deterioration of our great country. And change is coming, and change is coming tomorrow.
Right.
Regardless of what the media wants to highlight, regardless of what the campaigns want to highlight, we know what change looks like, and that change is Donald Trump.
Okay, one other thing he's done so far has filed lawsuits in Georgia and Pennsylvania related to the 2024 election procedures. Is he going to concede if he loses the 2024 election?
Listen, what he has always asked for, he's asked for a fair and free election. So yes,
and
we
what
have
is the definition of a fair and free election?
Has been successful. Let me finish. Some of those lawsuits has been successful. I do know this as well. In Pennsylvania, you had the county register of voters shut down, kick Republican voters out of line who were in line to wait. That feels like election interference by the administrative state. So yes, we had to go to law. We had to go to court. We won in court. We got a 3-day extension for early vote. Why did we get that 3-day extension, Ed? We got that 3-day extension because shenanigans were taking place in the county of Pennsylvania. So yes, President Trump wants a fair and free election. He's going to make sure that we litigate a fair and free election. And if the results are after a fair and free election that he hasn't won, then he's going to make that assessment. But you can't get ahead of the ball here. We're seeing voter registration fraud in Pennsylvania to the tune of 5,000 people have illegally registered to vote. Well, that's the first felony. We know what the next step is. They want to vote, and that's the next step. So when you're committing voter registration fraud, it's with the intent of committing election fraud. So we have to watch everything that's taking place. We have to defend a vote. We have to make sure that we all turn out. But we can't sort of put our heads in the sand and say that election fraud is not taking place. We have a best example of in Pennsylvania where you had nearly 5,000 illegal people registered voters take place.
Now that you've said all that, let me ask my question again. What is the definition of a fair and free election?
A fair and free election is everybody allowed to vote and it count legally and legal voters be allowed to vote. It certainly doesn't count with an illegal voter in Michigan voting, everybody acknowledging that that vote shouldn't take place because he's an illegal voter and that vote being counted regardless. That doesn't feel like free and fair to me, Ed. Okay. And it shouldn't feel like fair and fair to you.
Ryan Lanza, a senior advisor to the Trump campaign down there in Florida for us. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
The road to the White House runs right through 7 battlegrounds, including Pennsylvania. Next, our political panel takes a look at the state of play there and in the other 6 states that we're watching most closely. You're streaming America Decides.
We are better off than we were 4 years ago. When we cross the bridge into the 21st century, if we stay on this course, we'll be better off still. And we will do it together. Look at your children, think of your future.
Does Pennsylvania and its 19 electoral votes hold the keys to the White House? Well, if you look at the candidate schedules this election eve, it appears that is what they believe. Let's bring in our political panel, Maura Gillespie and Mariel Saez. Maura previously served as an advisor to former House Speaker John Boehner and Congressman Adam Kinzinger of Illinois. Mariel is a Democratic strategist who previously served as director of broadcast media on President Biden's White House communications team. Happy election eve to both of you. I know you celebrate, as we do here. Mariel, let's start with you. Everyone, certainly on your side of the aisle, is talking about this poll that was conducted on behalf of the Des Moines Register, suggesting that the vice president may win that state narrowly. How excited has it made Democrats? Should it make Democrats? And are you among those that believe it might actually be true?
Well, look, I don't like to put stock in any one poll, but I think what we're seeing with the latest trend of polling is that late deciding voters are breaking toward Harris. And I think that's because she has a message that resonates with them, that's focused on them, and she's putting forward a positive, optimistic vision for a future, a leader that is focused on them and their concerns. And, you know, I think abortion definitely plays a role in this. One thing from the Iowa poll that stood out to me was that women, particularly older women and independent women, were breaking for Harris. And I think you look at the issue of abortion and, you know, Trump really owning and bragging about overturning Roe, and these women saying, look, we don't want that future for our daughters, our granddaughters, and future generations, and we're ready to turn the page.
Well, what do you make of that number specifically, the over 65 number? Because, and I know the argument is she may be wrong with her poll, Ann Seltzer, but what it might signal is such a massive advantage for Harris among women voters, even in traditionally red states, that margins could be closer everywhere across the country tomorrow night.
It could be because of the fact that people remember, women especially remember what it was like before some of these laws were in place, right? You have these over 65 that remember what it was like before they had access to birth control and had the right to be at the table, you know, in a lot of ways. And so I think that unfortunately, I don't think it necessarily is about Kamala Harris. I think it's more about Donald Trump. And what he represents is misogyny. And in a large way, women do not want what he is telling us this week, and especially this past week, where he has made comments about how he's going to look out for us, protect us, whether we like it or not. That kind of derogatory, again, talking about us in ways that we are almost flippant. He has not tried to get the women's vote. He has largely ignored us. aside from these side comments, aside from calling any woman who he disagrees with low IQ and a dumb woman, that's not going to help you get the women's vote talking about us that way.
Let's say he loses because of that, because women in the battlegrounds and in other states vote against him, vote against other down-ballot Republicans. How quickly does the rest of the GOP learn that lesson? Or are they all going to go, oh, no, that was his problem. I feel differently about women, and I take them more seriously than he does. I mean, what kind of reckoning will there be?
I think you're going to see a lot of people who say either, oh, I never even saw him say that, or I never heard him say that.
Exactly.
I would never have supported him if I knew that. So unfortunately, we're going to see that in the years to come. But this is year 12 of us having Donald Trump at the top of the Republican presidential column. And I'm not alone. And when I say it, I am very ready for this to be over.
Mariel, we see the vice president spending today in Pennsylvania, the same thing that President Biden did 4 years ago. You think that could work? And do you think, absent Pennsylvania, she has any shot at winning the White House?
Well, look, there's no doubt that it's going to be very close in Pennsylvania. It's certainly neck and neck, but there's a lot of reason for optimism. The campaign went out and knocked 1.5 million doors this weekend alone. And the vice president, as you mentioned, is traveling the state today. And I think what you're seeing is, again, these late deciding voters swing her way because she's putting forward this optimistic vision. She's been very strategic about courting Republicans and independents and demonstrating and saying to them, look, I can be a president for you. I can be a president for everyone. I'm going to work across the aisle to get things done for you. And, Trump, unfortunately, has been on pretty much a revenge tour on the stump. And so, I think voters are exhausted by it and ready to turn the page, especially in the state of Pennsylvania.
Maura, we saw Nikki Haley publish a new op-ed titled, Trump isn't perfect, but he's the better choice. Do you think that works with Republicans who don't like Trump's rhetoric?
No, because again, think about the fact that Nikki Haley went back on her word and said, that even despite all the things that Trump said about her, she said, I'm going to go out there and support him. She showed up at the RNC. That's the last time we saw her out there with Trump. He has not invited her, welcomed her at all because she spoke poorly about him. And that's the kind of man that Trump is. And so, no, I don't think that this is giving her any credibility in terms of Republican circles, but not so much to Republican voters either, unfortunately.
In our remaining moments, I'm curious, this last day, election eve, is a terribly frustrating one for journalists because essentially you've done everything you can and it's left in the hands of voters. How did either of you, when you worked on campaigns, spend today and tomorrow waiting for results?
I'll go first. If I were, Kamala Harris, I would stop at a Wawa. I'm just going to put that out there. Coffee is important, and Wawa does it best. So
she's more of a tea drinker, but I give it. Mary, how about you?
That's right. I mean, look, it's all about the ground game. That's why you're seeing her and the campaign hold these concerts all across the battleground states, really try to mobilize, energize voters. And look, I fully agree with Maura. I don't think a Wawa stop would hurt.
I think a nap would help. I don't know about you guys, but that's how I would spend part of tomorrow. Maura Gillespie, Mariel Zayas, thank you both for being here. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Ed.
We should note, a Pennsylvania judge has ruled that Elon Musk's giveaway to voters can proceed through Election Day. The lottery that Musk is running gives a $1 million cash prize to a voter daily in the battleground states. To qualify, the winner must sign a petition for his pro-Trump political action committee, like this lady here. Philadelphia's district attorney had called the sweepstakes a scam and accused the tech billionaire of violating election laws. The FBI is ramping up security ahead of Election Day. What's being done to protect your vote? We'll explain. Coming up next, you're streaming America Decides.
There is a mainstream in American politics, and John Kerry sits on the far left bank. He can run from his liberal record, but he cannot hide.
Welcome back to America Decides. Down in Georgia, a judge has blocked attempts to keep voters in Fulton County from submitting mail-in ballots in person. Or Nicole Killian is speaking with officials in the Peach State.
We're already starting to see some legal challenges ahead of Election Day here in Fulton County, where over the weekend the Trump campaign, along with state and national Republicans, filed suit against the county for accepting absentee ballots over the weekend, even after the early voting period had closed. They argue that this was illegal. However, a judge rejected that argument, and Georgia's Secretary of State said that no laws were broken. I did have a chance to speak to the head of the state Republican Party, along with Fulton County election officials. Take a listen to both sides.
Do you think this is sowing doubt in the election?
I think it creates a real problem, which is unfortunate because I feel like by and large we've had a smooth election. And so it's really unfortunate that they created this issue. We weren't looking for this issue. All we're looking for is for Georgia law to be followed.
What Fulton County attempted to do was just to make sure that those voters who wanted to hand deliver their absentee ballots would have a place to hand deliver them.
The chair of Fulton County's election board told me that they will continue to follow the law, even if there are additional challenges. But overall, they feel pretty confident that things will run smoothly and securely Tuesday. We got an inside look at their election hub, which is a direct result of 2020. More than $30 million has been invested in this new center, which is where they will tabulate results. It's a much different setting than 4 years ago when they did the count at a local arena, which spurred a number of false voter fraud claims. This year, some 1,800 poll workers will be on the job Tuesday with extra security on hand. Ed?
Nicole Killian in Atlanta, thank you so much for that. And as all that is playing out in Georgia, law enforcement and intelligence agencies across the federal government are assembling operations centers in preparation for Election Day. This includes the FBI's command center at its headquarters in Washington. The deputy assistant director of the Bureau's criminal division said today the operation is, quote, more robust now than it's been in previous years.
More partner agencies are here, and we started the command post sooner. We started last week, and we're running it for a good 8-9 days. So those are the big differences.
A trio of guests who've been tracking stuff like this join us now. David Becker is a CBS News election law expert and political contributor. Nicole Skanga is a CBS News Homeland Security and Justice reporter. And Catherine Cole tracks the Supreme Court and legal issues for us as well. Nicole, let's begin with you. Federal officials tracking for potential violence or widespread misinformation today said they've so far seen no evidence of activity that has the potential to materially impact the outcome of the presidential election. But they believe Russia's already attempted to interfere in the election. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, Ed, there's no evidence of cyber hacking, but officials fear that our foreign adversaries, including Russia, will be successful in what's now known as perception hacking, undercutting trust in the integrity of this election by spraying a fire hose of disinformation online. We've seen Russia post fabricated videos just last week, one purporting to show Haitians voting illegally for VP Kamala Harris. Of course, not true. And today, a number of fabricated videos mimicking news organizations and officials circulating online, spreading false information about security threats ahead of Election Day. The videos were likely created by a Russian disinformation group, researchers tell us. In fact, one of those fabricated videos was created to look like a report from CBS News, falsely said the FBI was advising people to vote remotely due to a potential terror attack. Now, let's be clear, no such warning has ever been issued by U.S. officials in the run-up to Election Day. No such report was produced by CBS News, and you can't vote remotely. But this is straight out of a Russian playbook. It's called information laundering, pushing out false headlines disguised as legitimate news, amplified across social media platforms. Some of that activity sped up by artificial intelligence. But officials have been warning about these tactics, and there's plenty that you and I and everyone can do to stop the spread of these false narratives. Think before you click, and always verify the source of any information before you share it.
Nicole, that's fantastic. Now, you talked there about perception hacking, information, what was the other one?
Information laundering.
Laundering. David, you got all that, plus Trump now spreading claims of fraud in this election, accusing Pennsylvania of cheating. There are Republican attempts to purge voter rolls in a handful of states, all prompting concern from federal officials. I mean, what should voters make of all this?
Well, first of all, what voters should make of it is we've officially passed the 80 million mark of ballots that have been cast as of today. And in all of those 80 million ballots that have been cast, we haven't heard of any kind of significant fraud in any way. no safety concerns, not even many lines, quite frankly, except for maybe the last day of early voting when people put it off to the last minute. And that's remarkable. That's going to almost certainly be about half or more than half of the turnout already. So the good news is things are going smoothly despite all of this disinformation. But as you noted, even the former president is out there spreading false claims of fraud. He brought up this claim that there were 2,600 ballots that were allegedly forged in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. What actually happened is there were about 2,500 voter registration forms that were flagged and caught by election officials, and they weren't processed until those that could be confirmed were confirmed. That shows the process is working, actually. But instead, we're getting those claims made at rallies. They're then amplified, in this case, by Elon Musk and others. Often
Trump senior advisors who were on the program earlier.
Exactly. Yeah. And this is doing the work that Nicole was talking about of our foreign adversaries in many cases, who are trying to get us to distrust our process and trying to get us turned on our fellow citizens.
So, Catherine, then what legal recourse does the U.S. have if foreign or American actors are accused of unlawfully impacting the election?
Yeah, I mean, this happens, but we do have tools. We are not defenseless when this happens. When it comes to foreign actors, what that can look like is targeting sort of how that information enters the country. So the Justice Department can bring criminal charges against Americans who get caught up in propagandizing. There was a big indictment involving Russian propaganda earlier this year. And there's preemptive measures, too. The FBI worked with our big social media companies to help identify and collaborate on stopping disinformation. And then, of course, the traditional tools of foreign policy are available. President Trump issued an executive order that contemplated sanctions against foreign governments that interfere in our elections. President Biden has adopted that executive order. So there are tools available when it comes to foreign interference. And then with domestic interference, the toolbox is even bigger, frankly. I mean, it is a federal crime to interfere in our elections. Full stop. The FBI will be monitoring our polling places. They will be taking in reports of harassment, of fraud, of other problems. And undoubtedly later this week, we're going to see investigations, criminal charges. These things happen, but our officials are on top of it.
Yeah. Nicole, in our remaining moments here, about 40 seconds or so, the FBI showed off that Joint Operations Center today. How are they preparing exactly for the election?
Yeah, it's a 24/7 National Election Command post at headquarters here in Washington, D.C. It'll be open all this week. It's used to funnel information that comes into FBI tip lines towards its field offices and conversely pass up any reports of specific or credible threats up the chain of command. Notably, they say that the FBI CISA says that our election security landscape is more complex than ever. They also say we're more prepared than ever as federal law enforcement, as the U.S. government, to take on the sort of vast array of threats and challenges facing us in the run-up to Election Day, and by the way, Ed, in the days and weeks after.
And that is why we at CBS News are so prepared, because we have David Becker, Nicole Skanga, Catherine Cole, and many others tracking all this and prepared to report on it all as it plays out in the coming days and weeks. Thanks to all three of you. I know you'll be busy in the coming days. The economy might be a major election issue, but what about the wars in Ukraine and the Middle East? Next, we speak with Bob Woodward about his new book, War, and his unique view behind the scenes in the White House. You're streaming America Decides.
Tomorrow, we can put an end to a presidency that's divided this nation and fanned the flames of hate. Tomorrow, we can put an end to a presidency that has failed to protect this nation.
Welcome back to America Decides. Legendary journalist Bob Woodward's new book is revealing more about presidential candidates' character behind closed doors. Woodward reports that then President Trump sent Russian President Vladimir Putin COVID test machines in the middle of the pandemic. He also details a meeting between Vice President Harris and Ukrainian President Zelensky, where she warned him of the likelihood of a Russian invasion less than a week before it happened. Associate editor at The Washington Post, Bob Woodward, joins us now. Bob, it's great to have you with us. He is, of course, the author of the new book entitled War. Bob,
thank you.
Thanks for being with us. In that meeting that you report on between Harris and Zelensky, she tells him, quote, "Your numbers are wrong. You really face a potentially imminent invasion." What did you learn about her capability to do the job of president when she was dealing with the war in Ukraine and more broadly the crisis in the Middle East as well?
That she's very tough. She told Zelensky, you better have an escape plan because they're coming after you personally. All the reporting I did for the book shows how tough she is, surprisingly tough, quite frankly.
You write about Trump that his unwillingness to criticize Putin was not a one-off incident, but a consistent character trait. And I'm curious, when it comes to him and his character, what more did you learn about how he handled foreign policy, how he would handle it again?
And of course, the central question, who is he? Who is Donald Trump? One of the best ways to find out is to interview and quote the people who spent hours with him, actually, who gave their lives to defending the country. If you'll bear with me, real quick, former Chief of Staff, General John Kelly. This is what he says about Trump. He's an idiot. It's pointless to try to convince him of anything. We're in crazy town. Former Defense Secretary Mattis worked very closely with Trump. Unfit. He does not even try to unite the American people. He works at dividing them. Former Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Mark Milley, appointed to that post by Trump in 2019. What does Milley say about Trump? Is the most dangerous person to the country, a fascist to the core. That is the people who know him, who have served the country in a way that few have, and this is their universal judgment about his incapacity to do the job.
It's incredible evidence for a voter who may be concerned. But as you know, campaigns don't often focus on the actual work of and the point of and the focus of the presidency. And I'm curious how you think voters should think about the qualifications needed to do the job, and whether you get a sense that they really do think enough about that.
Somebody who's a leader and somebody who's trusted by the people that president or candidate has worked with. On the other side of this, you look at Vice President Harris. She has a national security advisor named Phil Gordon, who is steeped and knows all of these issues. The problem is Trump's national security advisor is his own mouth.
And there's clearly a difference of experience between those two. I guess, how would you encourage campaigns in the future to talk about the institution of the presidency and how to remind voters that this is really a critical element in who it is they're picking?
The most important role for a president is commander-in-chief. And Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin has said very emphatically that Trump is not ready to be commander-in-chief, but that Harris is.
The book is called War. The author is the great Bob Woodward, who is thankfully joined us here on Election Eve. We appreciate it, Bob. Thank you again.
Thank you.
That does it for today. We'll be back tomorrow for our special Election Day coverage. Join the CBS News team starting at 4 p.m. Eastern on CBS News 24/7 and from 7 p.m. Eastern on your local CBS station. The Daily Report starts right now.